Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about what's happening in the economy in Argentina. If you're a long-term follower of the channel, you'll know that Argentina has been struggling for a number of years, and in December 2023, the people of Argentina decided that enough was enough, they wanted a change, and they voted a rock and roll politician called Javier Milei as the president. And he took over on the 10th of December, so it's coming up to exactly 12 months that he's been in power. Now, when Javier Milei took over, inflation was sitting at 160% and interest rates were at an eye-watering 126%. And he said that things were going to get worse before they got better. And he was absolutely on the money with that statement, because by April 2024, inflation had skyrocketed to more than 290%. And everybody questioned whether or not the decisions that he was making were going to move Argentina in the right direction or to bring the whole country crashing down. However, over the past 6 months, we have started to see some green shoots of recovery. This chart shows the official rate of inflation in Argentina over the past 12 months. And as you can see, from the high point of 292% inflation in April, we've seen a consistent and steady reduction over the past 6 months, and the latest figures for October 24 show that inflation is now down to 193%, which represents a reduction of 100 points in inflation in the past 6 months. And this chart shows the movement in food inflation over the same period, and you can see that food inflation rose above 300% in February 2024, which represented the fastest rate that food prices have been increasing in Argentina for more than 30 years. However, in line with what we've just looked at for general inflation, over the past 6 months, food inflation has been slowing down. And the latest figures for October 24 show that food inflation is now down to 183%. So the reduction in inflation and food inflation over the past 6 months is encouraging. However, it isn't time to crack open the champagne just yet, because at 193%, Argentina still has the highest level of inflation out of every single country in the world. And just to put into context how severe the problems in Argentina are at the moment, the country with the second highest level in the world is Syria at 120%, and Syria is a war-torn country, as is the third-ranked country, South Sudan, with a rate of 107%. And Zimbabwe is coming in at number 4 on this list, and Zimbabwe's inflation rate is 57.5%, and Turkey's number 5 on the list with inflation of just under 49%. And the year-on-year increase in food prices of 183% is also ranked at number 1 globally, with Zimbabwe being the only other country in the world where food prices are rising above 100%. And as I've just discussed, Zimbabwe's economy is in complete dire straits. So clearly Argentina still has a long way to go. The road to recovery is going to be long and slow. However, in terms of interest rates, things have started to improve quite rapidly. When Javier Milei took over as president, the official interest rate in Argentina was 126%. However, over the past 12 months, the rate of interest has been reduced on 7 different occasions, with the most recent reduction taking place on the 5th of November to the new level of 35%. And you can see from this table that Argentina is no longer ranked as the country with the highest interest rate in the world. That accolade goes to Venezuela, where interest rates are above 59%. Turkey is number 2 on the list with an interest rate of 50%, and Argentina is now coming in at number 3, jointly with Zimbabwe. Now, one of the other problems that Javier Milei had when he took over as president was that there was a high level of dollarization in Argentina. The people of Argentina had lost faith in the Argentine peso, and so they would rather use the American dollar. They would rather be paid in it, hold their savings in it, and make payments in it. And that was because inflation was rising so rapidly that the value of the peso was diminishing on a daily basis. One of the first things that Javier Milei did as soon as he took over as president was to devalue the peso from around 370 to $1 to around 800. And he introduced a sliding reduction thereafter so that the value of the peso would continue reducing. And one of the reasons why he did that was because there was a huge differential between the official rate that was being set by the Argentine government and the black market rate for the Argentine peso, which is also referred to as the blue dollar rate. And this chart shows the movement in the blue dollar or black market rate for the Argentine peso over the past 5 years. And what this shows is that between November 2019 and July 2024, the value of the peso fell against the US dollar. And in 2023 and the first half of 2024, the fall in the value of the peso started to accelerate. And on the 10th of July 2024, the value hit an all-time low of 1,500 pesos to $1. However, as you can see from the far right-hand side of this chart, over the past 4 months, the value of the peso has started to improve. And the current black market rate is $1 for 1,135 pesos, which represents a significant improvement since the low point in July. And what this improvement in the black market rate for the peso tells us is that things might be starting to improve in Argentina. Certainly, the black market exchange rate thinks it is, because the value of the peso is now increasing relative to where it was 6 months ago. As we've talked about previously, one of Argentina's main problems is that it's a net importer. It's paying more for all of the goods that it's importing than it's receiving for all of the goods it's exporting. So it's running a negative balance of trade. It's constantly in the red, and so it's very difficult to break out of that cycle. And one of the ways that you can do that is if you've got some natural resources or something that other countries want to buy. And fortunately for Argentina and Javier Milei, they have the second largest shale gas reserves in the whole of the world and the fourth largest shale oil reserves. And if you're sitting in America, you'll be familiar with shale oil and gas, because at the turn of the century, there were a lot of concerns about what was going to happen in the US economy, because traditional oil and gas reserves were running down. They'd actually peaked in the 1970s in the US in terms of production. However, the shale oil and gas revolution around 20 years ago really changed the face of energy production in the US, and the US once again became a net exporter. And just to illustrate that point, this chart shows the natural gas flows in the USA, and what this shows is that in 2023, more than 76% of all of the natural gas in the USA was derived from shale gas wells. Now, interestingly, the area of Argentina where all of the shale oil and gas is located is called Vaca Muerta, which is Spanish for dead cow, and it was given that name back in the old days because of all of the fossil fuels under the ground. This is a very resource-rich area. The extraction of shale gas and oil differs to traditional extraction. Where you have usual gas and oil deposits, you can drill down, tap into those, and then they will come up to the surface, and you can just drain off all of that oil and gas. However, with shale oil and gas, it's actually dispersed throughout all of the rock, and therefore in order to extract the oil and gas, you need to crack the rock. To extract shale oil and gas, a drilling well is set up at the surface, and initially the drill goes vertical down into the ground. However, once you get to the rock where all of the oil and gas is situated, the drilling actually becomes horizontal. A mixture of water and chemicals is then injected at pressure into this borehole, and this causes the rock to fracture. Sand is then injected into these fractures to keep them open, and that releases the oil and gas that was previously held in the rock itself. Now, the process of hydraulic fracturing, which is also commonly referred to as fracking, has been in place for a long period of time. The US has been using it for more than 20 years. However, it is still controversial where the rock is located below areas of population, because there have been lots of reports of earth tremors, earthquakes, because when you're affecting the ground underneath where people are living, there is a potential that there could be some movement. And so there's been a lot of opposition in countries like the UK, where they've got lots of oil and gas located underneath urban areas. This chart shows the actual and projected levels of gas extraction in the Vaca Muerta area in Argentina from 2022 through to 2024. And the scale on the left-hand side of this chart is shown in millions of cubic meters per day. And what this shows is that over the past 2 years, there's been a rapid increase in the output of gas from 80 million cubic meters per day to the current level of 100 million. However, over the next 10 years, that level is expected to increase to more than 240 million cubic meters per day. And you can see from the colour coordination of this chart that there are currently 3 pipelines in place. However, as we move forward, it's expected that the number of pipelines will increase. And the area on the bottom right-hand corner of this chart actually shows the amount of liquefied natural gas that Argentina is looking to start exporting from 2029 onwards. But obviously, that will take a huge amount of investment because you need to set up not just a pipeline, but also the facilities to be able to convert the gas into an LNG format, which you can then export. This chart shows the level of shale oil production in Argentina dating back to 2010. And the scale on the left-hand side of this chart is shown in hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil. And what this shows is that over the past 4 years, there has been a huge increase in the amount of shale oil being produced. And the current level is running at around 400,000 barrels per day. However, the Argentine authorities believe that there is a potential to increase that to 2 million barrels per day. So all of this obviously represents really good news for Argentina, and it was recently announced that it's no longer importing gas from Bolivia. It's actually supplying its own network, and that's the first time that Argentina has been able to move into that territory. So that represents a really positive step forward. One of the key challenges that Argentina has is that in order to develop its oil and gas facilities, it's estimated that it needs investment of $58 billion. And Javier Milei has changed the strategy. He said that the state will no longer be sponsoring these schemes directly. In the past, Argentina was investing into its own facilities and keeping all of the oil and gas for itself, so therefore it would earn all of the revenue for any exports if it got to that stage. However, he's now decided that he doesn't want to sponsor it, and rather he's offered tax incentives for other companies to come in. And it was recently announced that Argentina's state-run oil company, YPF, is looking to raise $2 billion in financing in the second quarter of 2025 to complete the construction of a new pipeline and processing facility to be able to extract an additional 390,000 barrels of oil per day. And the intention with that fundraise is that $1.5 billion will be raised from overseas investors and $500 million will come from Argentinian investors. And this chart produced by JP Morgan shows the relative attractiveness of investing into Argentina versus other countries in South America. And the scale on the left-hand side of this chart is in basis points and goes from 0 at the bottom to 2,500 basis points at the top. And what this chart shows is that at the time when Milei took over as president, Argentina was seen as being the highest risk country in South America. And in order to secure investment, investors were looking for an additional premium of 2,500 basis points compared to all of the other countries in South America where it was less than 500 basis points. However, over the past 12 months, that premium has reduced significantly and is now sitting somewhere in the region of 750 basis points. So Argentina is definitely becoming more attractive as an investment proposition for overseas investors. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because I think what's happening right now in Argentina is absolutely fascinating. Javier Milei has now been in charge for around 12 months. And we're starting to see some of his policies bearing fruit. Initially, in the first 6 months, we saw inflation continuing to rise, and there were concerns that the country was going to completely collapse. However, over the past 6 months, we've started to see an improvement. Inflation is down from over 290% to around 190% today. Now, obviously, 190% is still ludicrously high. That means that year on year, prices have almost trebled, which is incredibly high. You can't really afford to live in that sort of environment. So it needs to keep coming down rapidly. It needs to get down to possibly 15 or 20% until we've got a situation where it's manageable. So at the moment, it's still off the scale. But Rome wasn't built in a day, and Javier Milei has a huge mess to sort out. So he's doing his best, he's trying to chip away at it, and we are starting to see some progress. We're also seeing progress in terms of food inflation, albeit it still remains at the highest level out of every country in the world. So that's obviously not great. And interest rates are sitting at 35%, which is still extremely high, but again, they're moving in the right direction. So there are potentially some green shoots of encouragement here. Whether or not they're able to see this through, whether or not Argentina can make it to the point where it gets onto a stable footing, remains to be seen. But what we talked about in today's video is that there is now the potential to be able to develop these oil and gas shale facilities in Argentina. They have the second largest gas reserves in terms of shale in the world and the fourth largest shale oil reserves. And as we talked about earlier in today's video, the shale oil and gas revolution in the USA basically turned the US from being a net importer to a net exporter. It revolutionized the industry and has really been a help for the economy. So there is a potential here that Argentina can follow the same path as the USA. If it can manage to fully exploit all of those deposits, it can start exporting gas and oil. It will no longer be spending more on its imports than it's earning from its exports, and therefore it can move into the black. So that all sounds very easy. However, getting from here to there is going to be a long and slow road because you can't just build these facilities overnight. Argentina certainly can't afford to build all of them themselves, and Javier Milei has come out and said that he doesn't intend to do that. He's going to give tax breaks and incentives to other companies to come in and do it for them. Now, the problem that Argentina has is that when you look at the history over the last 100 years, there have been instances where companies have come in to develop natural resources, and then the government in Argentina has moved the goalposts. They've said that they're setting price restrictions and they're also changing the contracts for overseas exports. So there is a concern for these big oil and gas companies that if they did come to Argentina, build everything, get it going, that if there was a change of government, then potentially they could lose out. So that's really the one thing that's holding back from all of those companies coming in and developing the facilities for Argentina. However, as we saw earlier, Argentina is improving in terms of its attractiveness to overseas investors. They're starting to become more convinced that Javier Milei is setting up a long-term stable government that won't mean that there's going to be radical changes at some point in the future. So if he can continue to persuade those big multinationals that Argentina is now working on more of a commercial basis, then maybe they will sign up to come in and develop all of these oil and gas facilities, build everything for Argentina, and Argentina over the next 5 to 10 to 20 years may start moving in the right direction. So the overall summary of today's video is that what we've seen from the data released in October is that Argentina is still in a very precarious position. Inflation is the highest out of every country in the world. Food inflation also. Interest rates are sitting at 35%. The currency is still trading at a very low level. However, we are starting to see some green shoots of recovery, and there is a huge potential in the dead cow region of Argentina to potentially move the country into the black and onto a stable footing. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and here's something to put a smile on your face.